Hey guys, how's it going? Cloud8 with you, and today we're going to be taking a look at Ultimate General Gettysburg. It's a real-time strategy game. If you've been around for a while, you might remember Sid Meier's Gettysburg back in the day. Very similar to that, I think, but sort of like an updated version. This game is the first one that I picked to take a look at for a variety of reasons. One, it's a strategy game, which I said if you checked out the channel intro, that was a goal of mine, was to look at strategy games. Two, it's clearly based in historical context, being the Battle of Gettysburg during the American Civil War. And three, it's not overly demanding, and right now I'm traveling for business, and my laptop just isn't really a gaming laptop, but it can certainly run this with no problem. So those are all three good reasons that we're taking a look at Ultimate General Gettysburg. A little bit of background on the game for you. It was actually made and developed, I won't say by one person only, but largely by someone you might be familiar with if you recall, or if you're familiar with Empire Total War, one of the earlier iterations of the Total War series, which hopefully we'll be looking at too when I get home and can actually use a computer that can run those games a little bit better. But if you remember that Empire Total War entry, you probably remember that it was on release. It was plagued with a lot of different issues, one of which was poor artificial intelligence and AI that just wasn't really up to snuff. And one guy known as Darth on the Empire Total War forums kind of set out to try to fix that and make it a little bit better. His name, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Nick Tomaitis, and he made Darth mod for the Empire Total War series, which was a immensely popular mod for that game. I played it quite a bit myself, and I thought it was fairly effective. Some people, there was controversy, I guess, maybe not controversy, but some people maybe thought it wasn't that great, and other people thought it was the best thing to ever happen to Empire Total War. So no matter where you stood on that issue, the fact is that Mr. Tomaitis, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but he had a focus on improving artificial intelligence, and in my opinion, that goal is a lofty goal, a difficult one, I'm sure, and certainly a worthwhile one. So what does that have to do with Ultimate General Gettysburg? Well, I'll call him Darth because I can pronounce that, has put his efforts into making a real-time strategy game here that really takes advantage of having a good artificial intelligence, and we'll kind of see how that plays out in this game. He, on the website, which is www.ultimategeneral.com, I'll try to remember to put a link up in the video description for that, but ultimategeneral.com will tell you a little bit more about it. It's on Steam for $15. I think it's worth it. It's not, certainly not expensive for a PC video game, and then I think you can get some replay value out of it, and it's a pretty solid game overall, is my initial opinion, and I'll kind of tell you why I think that's the case as we play through it here. It's touted as a real-time strategy game with a unique AI and gameplay set in the American Civil War. So the AI is kind of the focus on this. We'll kind of step through and look at it here as we go. So this is the main menu that you kind of come into the screen, come into the game with. A couple different things. Continue. If you've saved one of your campaigns or a battle, you can just load that back up there. It does have multiplayer. Honestly, can't comment on that. Haven't played the multiplayer. I'm not a huge multiplayer person myself, but it is working, I know. So there's that. If you have friends that are interested in this and want to get together and fight out the Civil War, I think it's just 1v1 right now, as of version 1.03, which is what I'm using. Fight a new battle, basically that brings you into the, hey, let's fight the campaign, if you will, of Gettysburg over the 3 days. So that gives you a choice to pick the sides. Custom battles, this is where I think the replay really comes from. So you can pick The way the game is set up, it follows the 3-day Battle of Gettysburg, and notice you see 4th of July here because um, another feature of the game is that it allows you to change history a little bit, and depending on your results in the battle, you could possibly, what if the Union counterattacked after Pickett's charge on the 4th of July kind of thing, and so you can see some scenarios that go along with that. But basically, all these different ones are different scenarios you can pick to fight out, and this randomize button, paraphrasing from the manual, basically says it randomly changes the stats of the units. So, say you have 3 brigades with 1,500 men. With it off, you'd always start with those 3 brigades with 1,500 men. If you turn randomize on, one of them might have 1,200, another might have 1,300, just simulating like battle casualties and conditions throughout the campaign like that. So that you can set it up so that it's never exactly the same with any of these scenarios. So that's kind of neat. Options are pretty basic, which is fine. You'll see when we get in. I think it still looks pretty darn good. Resolutions, windowed, unit transparency, and shadows. Tilt shift effect is kind of a neat effect. Basically, just like it blurs the outside edges. I can't remember what the graphical term for that really is, but so it's clear where you're focused and it's kind of blurred on the edges, which I think is a cool effect. But for the Let's Play, I'm going to turn it off just so you guys can see clearly the entire picture. I think it's just better for our review and Let's Play with it off. But I think it does look cool. So if I was playing it by myself, not recording, I would turn it back on. Pretty neat. Sound is pretty obvious, just in-game sound and music. Controls, not a lot of controls, and that's fine, and you'll see why. It's basically made to be. If you're familiar with Civil War games, there's Scourge of War, Gettysburg, and the Scourge of War series. Those are a little bit more advanced, a little bit more realistic, if I want to call it that, tactical games, and this one is a little bit more of an introductory level. But not to say that it's not complex, just that it's not as in depth as those type of games. And these controls are more than enough. You'll see. Gameplay, line of sight stuff. We'll talk about this in the game. I can't really explain it outside of the game well. Basic set of options, nothing too crazy in there. I do like this guide and tutorial section. The online guide, what that ends up being is really just an online web page of the manual that you can download from Steam. So that's fine. Hey, whatever. Quick link to the manual. That's great. These tutorial videos are really cool. There are 16 different sections, and as you can see, it basically just tells you the basics of the game. So if you don't want to read the manual, you don't want to go online and look at guides or tutorials or whatever. If you just want, like, I think I watched all of these in probably less than 5 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes, something like that. Pretty simple, but they tell you all the basics: how to move a unit, how to stop a unit, how to rotate, range attack, charge, all this stuff, in just a few minutes, and it shows you on screen like, hey, push this, press this key, drag the mouse this way, this is what it looks like. And if you're kind of a visual learner, I think that's pretty useful. So I really think that is a great idea as just a real basic, hey man, jump in 5 minutes, here's how you play the game. So that was a great idea, I think. So again, back to the basics now that we've kind of introduced the game and we know a little bit of the background behind it. Another reason that it's a great fit, other than the 3 that I listed earlier, is that it really is going to let us A, play a game and have some fun, but B, like, talk about some history, some cool stuff that happened, and discuss the Battle of Gettysburg and the generals and the troops and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys and your inputs. I'm by no means an expert on the Civil War or the Battle of Gettysburg, but I could probably teach it to like an elementary, high school kind of level. So if you guys know more than me, then I would love to learn from you. And if you don't know anything about it, then I'll tell you what, you'll learn something from me. And that's one of the goals of the channel. I think it's going to be fun. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the campaign. So we'll click Fight a New Battle. part of what Darth has done here is he has generically given strengths and weaknesses to each side, which I think, again, simplifying it for the sake of gameplay, are relatively realistic. You can read both sides here, but generically he's saying the Union has the technological advantage, better artillery, better drilled infantry, more troops, more time to train them, that kind of thing. So their ranged performance essentially is better, but they suffer when it comes to fixing the bayonet and charging. Your Union troops, the Federals, are just not up to snuff compared to the Confederates. Again, that's generically speaking. Of course, you could find units throughout history that would not certainly be true of at all. On the Confederate side, hey, it's tough. There's a blockade going on. They didn't have the manufacturing capacity that the North had. They didn't have the raw numbers of people that the North had to fill their armies. So they don't have those good technological artillery pieces. They don't have a lot of the military training other than their leaders, which is noted in the text there. So the average Union soldier, not good in the melee range. The average Confederate soldier, yes, because he's high-spirited. He's fighting for a cause, fighting normally on his homeland, though in Gettysburg here he's in what is the North in Pennsylvania. But generally he's on his homeland. He's high-spirited and courageous. So when it comes to the bayonet, he's superior to the Union soldier generically. And then leadership, the Union by 1863, I feel like, especially in the Western theater with Ulysses Grant and a couple other leaders out there, the Union leadership is catching up. In the East, by 1863, George Meade, certainly not the worst commander the Union Army of the Potomac has ever had, but not the best either. So, a middling general, more or less. The Confederates, Army of Northern Virginia, led by General Lee, probably one of the greatest American generals ever. So, there's that, and then of course, they've got Longstreet, they've got Lee, Jackson, who's was killed in the Battle of Chancellorsville by this point. But you can see that generally speaking, the Confederate leadership was better. So that's kind of the differences between the two sides. So if you can't tell from my accent, I'm from the North, so I'm going to go ahead and play as the Union. Now here's our first look at Darth's ideal setup for an AI. Now he touts on the website that, hey, I don't need to build cheats into my AI because I just make it smart. So what does that really mean? Well, you can see there's a bit of a graph going on here. So as you move to the right, the AI becomes more aggressive, and as you move up, it becomes more difficult. So this would be, in theory, this would be probably the easiest, because not only is it easy, but it's not very aggressive. So you can see, and it gives you a little bit of text about each of these as you pick them. So he's got 9 different AI generals you can fight against, essentially, with different personalities and ideas. Then if so cautious, he does artillery bombardments. He doesn't really assault vigorously. But if you go up here to determined, now this guy, he's gonna be skilled but also aggressive. So you can see how maybe the best one the hardest opponent might be this balanced one here in the middle, or even a dynamic one. Risky one you could maybe exploit because he's overly aggressive, so you could kind of lure him into traps, something like that. I think this is a very good idea. I've played a little bit of this prior to setting up these videos, and my general take on it is that the AI is pretty strong, and I am generally not a competent strategy gamer. So I'll tell you what, we're gonna keep the difficulty down, and we're gonna give them opportunists, so that they're gonna look to try to split their forces and try to outflank me as I'm playing. And they're going to look for opportunities to exploit my mistakes. So I think that's fair. We'll see how well I do. If I get completely slaughtered, then hey, we know the AI is pretty strong. But even if I am able to come out on top, I think we'll see how it performs and take a look at really what it's doing, and is it really being opportunistic and exploiting my mistakes. And then this boost AI button I just read about the other day online, basically it just increases the rate at which the troops recover, kind of thing. So it doesn't really, it's not like an AI cheat per se, although it sounds like it maybe is a little bit, but not to the point where it's overly unbalanced or anything, I guess, according to Darth. So we'll go with Opportunist as our opponent for the commander for the Confederates. All right. So the first day, July 1st, 1863, early in the morning at 9:30. So here's kind of where we can get into discussing some history. I think the setup of the game is pretty historically accurate. So what we've got basically are uh, you can see on this map, the blue is going to be the Union and the red is the Confederacy. Down here in the bottom right, the southeast corner of the map, that's the town of Gettysburg. And as you can see, there's several relatively major roads running into the town of Gettysburg. And in the 19th century, armies marched on roads. They rode on railroads. Those were the ways that you moved large numbers of men. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of men on either side converging on this little town in Pennsylvania, and you can see why, because it's really like the center of a spoke of like a hub wheel kind of thing with all these roads coming in, and both Meade and Lee saw that and used that to converge their armies at this point. Now, morning of 1st of July 1863, if you've ever seen the movie Gettysburg, you probably remember this is when General Buford and his cavalry division kind of come in, and they're attempting to hold this high ground. You can see maybe on the map there's some ridges to the northwest of Gettysburg with really defensible high ground that it's hard for the enemy to assault up and take that. So Buford sees that. Buford is one of the smarter Union commanders, I think. And so he sees, man, this ground is great. I need to hold this until the rest of the Union Army and the main line infantry comes up. So a small battle to begin with, but you can see Buford's cavalry division not very large, 2,200 men, and only 6 artillery pieces. Over here, unfortunately, we're going to be outgunned almost 4-1 with 20 guns for the Confederacy, and this is, I believe, Henry Heath's division, I want to say, with nearly 4,200 troops and 20 guns coming in to try to push us aside. Now, early on in the engagement, Heath underestimated Buford and thought that he was just town militia and that he could push him aside easily, but as you can see, and if you recall from history, it didn't really work out that way. Now, expected reinforcements are pretty much even on both sides, although we will be getting more guns than the Confederacy. So this was going to be the First Corps under General Reynolds, another strong Union leader who was unfortunately killed early on when he brought his men into the fight after Buford held that ground. So we'll see how that works out. Should end up being pretty even by the end of the battle, except we might have a few more artillery pieces, which should help us out. This army details screen is pretty neat. I like it. We've got a cavalry corps, so the Army of Potomac's the whole Union Army. Well, on the field for us in this particular engagement, this is the whole Union Army. So this is what the white is what we have, and the grayed out color is what we're expecting to get. So 1st Army Corps under Major General John Reynolds, and right now we have, and you can see him there, and then right now we have Major, so that's a cavalry corps, so this is just Buford's division. General John Buford with Gamble, Colonel Gamble and Colonel Devon are his 2 brigade commanders, and they've got some skirmish units. So we'll go ahead and, we don't have to belabor this, but I think this is a neat thing, especially for historians that like to get into the details and look at the commanders and stuff, so that's cool. So let's go ahead and click fight, and we'll pause it and take a look at the map. Another piece of the game that's kind of touted as being impressive, and I generally speaking agree with it, is the map was taken from satellite imagery and historical maps and photos of the time. So things like now, I don't know if you guys have ever had the chance to go to the actual battlefield of Gettysburg. I have. It's been years, so I'm not, and I was fairly young at the time. I think middle school kind of age. So I knew the basics of the Battle of Gettysburg, but maybe not as much as I know about it now, and I would love to go back. But big picture. So right now we're not looking at really the entire battlefield of Gettysburg. We're just looking at the northwest portion. So here's the town, and then the high ground that we talked about. To the northwest of it, based on again satellite imagery and historical photos. So, if you remember from the movie of Gettysburg, if you've ever seen it, Buford he gets up into this cupola on top of this building, which I think was supposed to be the Lutheran seminary on Seminary Ridge here, and he says, "Man, this is really great ground. We need to hold this until the infantry can come up and really make a stand against the Confederates." So, Buford's plan here, and our plan is going to be to hold Seminary Ridge, that's 2,500 victory points, Oak Ridge to the north of that for 1,000, and then up here Oak Hill if we can hang on to that for another 500. And the Confederates get 3,500 just for holding the Chambersburg Pike, which is this road, one of the main roads that leads into Gettysburg there. And that's where most of their reinforcements are going to come from as well. So you can see what we've got to work with here. I'll go over quickly how the units kind of work. You've got your general. The generals, you can double click them and they select everybody that's kind of in their unit. Additionally, you can see how when you select him, he has 2,260 soldiers and 6 guns. He hasn't lost any men yet. Morale and condition. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But the generals actually, they can't attack and they can't be killed, so they're just kind of like a morale boosting force that you can move around. And they do retreat in front of the enemy, so you can't like use them as cheat scouts or something like that. But overall, not super important other than you just move them around it, and they are important for rallying your troops, I guess, but not as a combat unit, I should say. Now these are the actual brigades. These are kind of what you're going to be manipulating most of the time. There's 3 types. There's which we can all see right here. We've got cavalry, infantry, and artillery. And then on the right hand side, you've got commands you can give to them, which correspond with those keys that we saw we could change earlier in the menu. Hold, charge, fall back, and halt. Halt just being stop, basically. Fall back being keep firing at the enemy, but slowly retreat. Charge is pretty obvious, and hold is again, we talked about the AI. The AI controls your friendly troops as well, and it kind of reacts to the enemy's movements. If you click hold or tell them to hold, they're not going to fall back on their own. Basically, they're going to stand their ground. So that's cavalry. Infantry is the same set of commands. Artillery is a little bit different. You've got auto, which basically says, hey, Lieutenant John Califf, you command this battery and you pick what you think ammunition is best to engage the enemy. Now we can tell him fire with a shell. That's kind of your intermediate range option, like an exploding cannonball, generically speaking. We can tell him canister, and that's a short-range shotgun type, and we can say solid shot, which is what everybody thinks of, which is just basically a big cannonball. And you can see when I did that, this dark line is his range. So solid shot being the furthest, canister the shortest, and shell being the intermediate. So we'll leave it on auto for now. And then he has some commands over here we can tell him to fall back as well. So I talked about line of sight was one of the settings. Watch, if we click this guy, you see the lighter terrain, that's what he can see. And then same thing with this guy. And so you can change like how heavily that is shaded. But I think that's pretty cool. So like another thing is if I press the M key, we get a topographical map, which it's like at first I was like, okay, well, who really cares about that? Like you got to be like really in depth to care about a topographical map. But you know what? It's very useful because now I can see. Well, why can Gamble's skirmishers see so far? Well, it's because they're standing on top of this hill, which is, I'm assuming that's in feet. I'm not sure. 448 feet above. Down here, 432. So I don't know what the contour lines denote. I guess I could probably look that up or kind of intuit it from the differences here. But basically it tells you, hey, here's the high points. And so that's good for placing your artillery and your troops to get the max vision range. And they also get bonuses from being up high. And that's another thing we can talk about. So each of these units has different ratings up here. So they've got morale, condition, cover, and reload is just pretty obvious. Like, are they reloading their volley? Like, how far along are they on that? Cover is, what are they standing in? So up here, they're in an open field, right? It looks like a field. Maybe a little bit of a ditch for the road. So not really high percentage of cover. Same thing with these guys out in the middle of the field. If we were to move them back into this brush woods area, that you'd see that cover percentage go up, and they would then take fewer losses, presumably. Condition and morale intermix. So morale is how happy they are to be on the field today and fighting, and how much they believe in their cause generically. Condition is more like, hey, do we have enough bullets? Do we have water in our canteens? Have the guys gotten to eat lunch today? That kind of stuff. Condition is like, how tired are they? Like physical condition. Morale is like a less physical, less concrete way of looking at the troops and their current state. So they intermix. Obviously, if you haven't eaten today, your morale's not going to be real high. Whereas if you've had a great lunch, but you're getting shot up pretty hard and you're retreating, your morale's not going to be real high even if you have a great condition. So that's how those two kind of work together. You can play and pause up here. I think this is just troop disparity. They had much more than we did. The little skull shows how many enemy troops this unit has killed. And then you can also group people by just drawing a line around them like that. That's pretty handy. And then as far as like giving orders, it's cool. It looks like an old battle map, like on the History Channel. You can just like draw it around and say like, okay, go flank these guys, and they'll kind of march off and go do that. It's pretty intuitive, pretty neat, pretty simple way of doing things. So it's just left click to select, left click to drag, and then if I say I don't want to do that, just double click on them and that cancels it. So that's kind of an introductory look at how this is going to play out. Again, the tilt shift effect for the graphics, it would kind of blur the outside edges here as I zoomed in. I'm going to leave that off just so you guys can see everything clearly while we're playing. Part 2, that was kind of the introduction, but part 2 we'll start up the battle, and we'll see if we can command Buford's troops and hold the high ground here and keep the Confederacy off of the hills while we wait for General Reynolds to come support us. So until then, fly safe and game on, everybody.